the intensity, the speed, just the sheer spectacle of Formula One. There's really nothing quite like it, is there? Watching these incredible machines, the teams, pushing everything to the limit.
Absolutely electric.
But today, we're actually going to pull back the curtain a bit on this whole world. We want to explore something you might not think about during a Grand Prix, which is how this entire ecosystem, F1 itself, and the teams within it, how they generate these, well, staggering amounts of money, how they grow their value, and how they operate as these really high-stakes global businesses.
Yeah.
That's our deep dive today.
And it's genuinely an astonishing financial transformation we've seen.
Right.
When U.S.-based media, Liberty Media, bought F1 back in 2017, it was valued around, what, $8 billion? That's the enterprise value.
Okay, so the whole company value, debt and all.
Exactly. Fast forward to today, and that value has basically doubled. It's floating around $16 billion now.
$16 billion, wow.
And then you look at the 10 teams on the grid. Collectively, they're valued at over $15 billion.
$15 billion just for the teams.
Yeah. The top teams, think Ferrari and Mercedes, maybe Red Bull. They're now worth an incredible $3 billion each. And you just can't buy any team for less than maybe $750 million these days.
That's an incredible barrier to entry now.
It is. And this rapid, almost unbelievable rise in value, that's exactly what we're going to unpack for you today, using the source material you gave us.
Okay, so let's just drive home that point about the growth again. F1's enterprise value jumps from $8 billion to around $16 billion in just, what, 6 or 7 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And the teams themselves, those 10 powerhouses, now collectively worth over $15 billion. That kind of surge is just, it's remarkable.
It really is, and it speaks to this relentless drive that's just embedded in the culture of F1.
It's not just about getting bigger financially, is it? It's that mindset. You hear people inside the teams talking about this half-glass-empty perspective.
Yeah, always pushing.
It sounds almost exhausting, frankly, but it clearly fuels this constant innovation. They really believe that if you're standing still, you're going backwards.
Because everyone else is pushing forward.
Yeah.
Nonstop.
Right, and that constant competitive push, that seems to be a huge driver of this value surge we're seeing.
It's absolutely core to what makes F1, well, F1. You're always hunting for the next gain, however tiny.
So with all that intensity, all that ambition, who are the people actually steering these multi-billion-dollar operations? We see the team principals on TV shouting on the pit wall. But how do the business side and the racing side really connect? What about these dual roles, CEO and team principal? Are they sometimes the same person?
Oh, they absolutely can be. A prime example is Toto Wolff at Mercedes.
Right.
He's pretty unique because he's CEO and principal and a part owner. He talks a lot about his priority being creating a framework where performance people are able to thrive.
Okay, enabling the specialist.
Exactly. So he has to balance his time. You've got the 23 race weekends a year where he's the team principal, you know, leading a high-performing sports team.
Intense focus.
And then the rest of the year, Monday to Friday, he's the CEO of what he calls a high-tech technology business. It certainly keeps him busy, as he says.
I can only imagine. That's an incredible balancing act.
Yeah.
How does that compare elsewhere? What about, say, the McLaren Racing CEO? What are their key responsibilities?
Well, the way I describe it, their job is multifaceted. First, secure the best talent. Second, give them the resources and the direction they need.
Makes sense.
And then, crucially, on the commercial side, it's about bringing in and servicing new corporate partners. And they're reporting to the board, apparently, 7 days a week.
Wow, 7 days a week?
It's a nonstop operation.
So
focusing on both the, internal performance and that external commercial success.
It really sounds like it. And the backgrounds of some of these leaders are just fascinating, aren't they? Any journeys that particularly stand out in how they prepared them for these really high-stakes jobs?
Oh, definitely. You look at Christian Horner at Red Bull Racing.
Yeah.
He started racing go-karts when he was just 11. He even did some testing as a test driver in F1.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Then he moved into management, and Red Bull tapped him to be their first team principal when they bought the Jaguar F1 team. So, racing background.
Okay.
Then you've got someone like Gunther Steiner at Haas. He started way back in '86 as a mechanic in rallying.
A mechanic from rallying to F1 team principal.
Exactly. And he stresses how that background gives him a big advantage because, as he puts it, it's very difficult to pull the wool over my eyes.
Okay.
He knows the sport from the ground up, gives him a really unique perspective on all the operational stuff.
Speaking of the ground up, let's talk costs.
Yeah.
Because the cost of just competing at this level seems astronomical. You see these cars, they look like, I don't know, sculptures on wheels.
They really are.
But they're incredibly expensive. The operating costs for these teams are just sky high.
Oh, they are. Take Mercedes again. Their operating costs were over $400 million. That was back in 2022.
$400 million just for 1 year.
Yep. And that covers everything.
Yeah.
Marketing, mechanics, R&D, those huge driver salaries, everything. It's an immense figure for just one racing team.
That is truly staggering, just to operate. And the cars themselves, I mean, they look complex, but why are they so expensive?
Well, because they're described as aerodynamic miracles, basically. And they're built entirely from scratch.
Okay.
A single F1 car, just one, can cost around $50 million just to develop. Then actually building it costs a couple $1 million more.
$50 million for development.
And some individual cars racing on the grid are valued at a mind-boggling $25 million each.
$25 million for one car. That might crash in the first lap.
Exactly. And here's the real kicker. They generally last only one season before they typically end up in a museum or a collection.
One season. That's an unbelievable investment for such a short lifespan.
Astronomical, really.
So that $400 million plus annual budget,
Yeah.
where does most of that actually go? Is it all just the cars?
It heavily weighted towards them. Research and development R&D that's cited as the biggest single investment.
Right.
Think about it this way. If a car started the year, say, on pole position, fastest car out there, and then you didn't touch it, didn't develop it at all, by the end of that same season, it would probably be dead last.
Seriously, that fast?
Yeah, it's what they call a prototype business. They have new stuff, new parts, new upgrades on the car pretty much every single race weekend, constantly pushing. You're truly never standing still.
Constant evolution. Okay, so given these just relentless costs, perfection, innovation, how on earth do these teams actually bring in the money to pay for all this?
Right, the revenue side. Primarily, it boils down to two main streams. Sponsor contracts and the prize money they get from F1 itself.
Okay. Sponsors and prize money, that's the lifeblood.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that prize money. How does that actually work? Is it just, whoever wins gets the most? Or is it more complicated?
It's a bit more complicated. The prize money pot is essentially split into 3 columns, you could say.
3 columns?
Yeah. One column is just for participation, basically showing up. Another column is based on where you finish in the Constructors' Championship, the team standings.
Right, performance-based.
And then there's a third column that has this kind of historical component. And Ferrari, being the longest standing team, the only one that's been there since the beginning, they benefit the most from that historical column.
Ah, interesting. A bonus for heritage.
Kind of, yeah. A unique historical bonus.
So talking real numbers then, how much revenue are we looking at for a top team like, say, Mercedes again?
Mercedes is generating around $600 million annually, and they're growing that somewhere between 10 to 15% per year.
$600 million a year and growing.
Yeah, and they have pretty predictable income streams, actually, because their big sponsorship contracts, they typically run for 5, sometimes even 10 years. Gives them long-term stability.
Okay, that makes sense for a giant like Mercedes. But what about a smaller, maybe privately owned team like Haas? How vital are those sponsor relationships for them?
Oh, absolutely crucial. For Haas, they say something like 1/3 of what we do is just dedicated to PR, sponsor relations, marketing, media.
1/3 of their effort.
Yeah. These partners are vital. Gunther Steiner says they make this possible for a smaller team like Haas. He also points out that the logo, the sticker on the car, is just the icing on the cake.
Right, it's more than just visibility.
Exactly. The real value, he explains, is in the actual relationship. It's about helping those partners hit their own specific marketing goals. It's a much deeper integration.
That makes perfect sense. It's not just slapping a logo on. It's a proper strategic alignment, like MoneyGram choosing Haas. What was the strategy there? How does F1 connect to their business?
Well, MoneyGram, they're an American company looking to grow globally, right?
Okay.
They looked at F1's calendar and saw it races in about 20 different countries. And those countries, in a typical year, overlapped with something like 70% of MoneyGram's send revenue.
70% overlap. That's significant.
Huge. And they also found that F1 fans often match their target consumers ages 25 to 35, often in migrant communities sending money back home. So the sport, the global reach, the specific fan demographic, it all just clicked. A very strategic move.
That's incredibly targeted.
Yeah.
Very smart. And for a brand like Mercedes, with such a long automotive history, what's their angle, their long-term branding play with F1?
For Mercedes, yeah, it's absolutely a long-term branding exercise. It's about shaping what people think when they hear Mercedes.
The perception?
Exactly. They carry this star, their famous logo, and they really emphasize their heritage, building race cars and road cars. They famously point out that the first ever Mercedes was a racing car.
Connecting it right back to the beginning.
Right. It's not just a sponsorship for them. It's like fundamental to their identity.
And then there's Red Bull,
Mm-hmm.
an energy drink company owning not one, but effectively two F1 teams. That seems like a massive investment just for marketing. How did their shareholders see that?
Well, the shareholders, especially Dietrich Mateschitz, who started it all, were always passionate about racing. But beyond that, they saw F1 as the perfect platform to market their brand globally.
In the perfect platform. Why F1 specifically?
Because it's described as the most viewed sport in the world outside of the Olympic Games and the Football World Cup.
Okay, huge audience.
But crucially, the Olympics and World Cup only happen every 4 years. Formula One races happen almost every 2 weeks during the season.
Constant visibility.
Exactly. So purely from a brand recognition perspective, it's been judged a huge success for them. Consistent global exposure.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly expensive, incredibly high stakes. And historically, it was really tough for many teams to actually make money, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Many teams are losing significant amounts.
But there's been a major shift recently. Liberty Media, the owners, brought in something pretty radical, the cost cap.
Yes, a truly revolutionary change for the sports business model. The cost cap, set at $135 million in 2023, limits how much teams can spend on building, developing, and running their cars.
$135 million, that's still a lot, but way down from those $400 million figures we heard earlier for some teams.
A huge difference, yeah.
So what's been the impact of this cap? Because I imagine for investors, for team owners, it must be incredibly positive. Predictability, maybe?
Overwhelmingly positive by most accounts. For investors, exactly. It provides predictability. They now know roughly how much they need to spend each year.
Right.
It's made the businesses sustainable, much more like, say, American sports leagues that have salary caps.
Okay, like the NFL or NBA model? Kinda.
Sort of, yeah. And for teams like Haas, who admitted they were losing 7, 8, 9 figures before the cap, they're now profitable sports teams.
Profitable. That's a massive turnaround. Are there any downsides, though? Does it stifle innovation, maybe? Or does it really help smaller teams catch up?
Well, some might argue it limits pure, unchecked engineering extravagance, perhaps. But the consensus seems to be that it's leveled the financial playing field significantly. It allows more teams to compete sustainably, which ultimately should lead to closer racing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So other teams are heading towards profitability to that.
Seems so. McLaren, for example, mentioned they're close to a break-even, and they're aiming for actual profitability this year or maybe next.
Good for them.
And they emphasize, a business cannot be just an investment project. It needs to be profitable to ensure its future.
Absolutely.
And this move towards profitability, driven by the cap, it's led to this surge in team value, as we talked about earlier.
Right, the $750 million minimum buy-in.
Exactly. And you saw that concrete example with the group of celebrity investors, actors, athletes, taking a 24% stake in the Alpine team. That deal valued Alpine north of $900 million.
$900 million for Alpine.
Oh, yeah. So the long-term goal here is clear. Have more teams capable of actually winning races, create a more competitive, unpredictable field, which, is ultimately better for the sport and definitely better for us fans.
Absolutely. It really feels like a new era for F1. And speaking of the future, the sport is clearly booming, isn't it? Especially with attracting a new, younger audience.
Oh, absolutely. That burgeoning appeal to a newer, younger audience is undeniable. You see it particularly in the U.S., where F1 is suddenly, widely loved.
Yeah, the drive to survive effect, maybe?
Partly, yeah. People who maybe struggled to explain the sport before are now seeing this widespread enthusiasm. New fans really embracing the drama, the tech, the personalities.
It's great to see. And looking ahead, say, to the 2024 season, the rivalries are always simmering, aren't they? Mercedes, for instance, they've been quite open about shaking things up. What are their hopes?
Yeah, they've explicitly stated they have completely changed the concept of our car for 2024.
A whole new concept. Risky.
Could be, but they feel that all their tough learnings from the last couple of seasons, getting it wrong, now make sense. They think the car is going to be in a much better place.
But are they confident?
Well, they admit they're still unsure if it's good enough to beat a Red Bull, or specifically Max Verstappen right now, but the aim is definitely to be right up there, fighting at the front again.
And that rivalry, Red Bull versus Mercedes, it's become such a huge part of the F1 narrative, hasn't it? Almost its own soap opera sometimes.
It really has. And as one of their rivals cleverly put it, Mercedes might seem a bit quiet at the moment, but you know they'll be back.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a Terminator. You just know they're coming eventually.
Love that analogy.
It really speaks to that relentless drive, that ambition that just permeates every single level of the sport.
What an incredible journey we've been on today. Really digging into the business side of F1. It's so much more than just the raw speed and those gladiatorial battles on track. It's this sophisticated, incredibly high value, and now increasingly profitable global business empire. From that astonishing growth and value we talked about to the specific roles of the leaders.
Right.
Those sky-high costs of innovation, the strategic ways they bring in revenue. It's clear F1 is really a masterclass in modern sports enterprise.
It truly is. And, you know, as F1's value just keeps climbing and these strategic partnerships get deeper and the cost cap continues to revolutionize how teams operate, it does raise an important question, maybe something for you to ponder. What are the broader implications here for how other major sports leagues around the world might operate in the future, and how brands will continue to leverage these massive global platforms? How will that balance that tension between relentless, cutthroat competition on one side and sustainable profitability on the other? How will that continue to shape the future of sporting entertainment for you?